So, like I said at the beginning, this will be a somewhat different program tonight. We have seen the world change so rapidly in ways that we couldn't have imagined 3 or 4 months ago. And during this time off, as I was observing events, there seemed to be a clarity in what was going on. And so I felt a burden to share with you what I have perceived. Now, the first obvious question would be, why go to the book of Job? Wouldn't Revelation or Daniel be more relevant to the topic? And I hope the answer will be evident by the end, but the short answer is that as we head into the final events of the world, I believe that the experience of Job is the most helpful in clearly understanding what we are going to face. You know, these last few months have kind of been a shock across the board. All of a sudden, we no longer had church. Poof, just like that. And while we could get some content online or on the TV, the fact of the matter is that our conversations moved onto platforms where everything we said could be recorded, monitored, and even censored. Someone on TV said, "Boo!" and the whole world ran like so many pigeons into their homes and padlocked their doors in fear. You know, I have always wondered, how would it be possible for Satan to get the whole world to follow after him? And then out of nowhere comes this virus. And the whole world, Christians, atheists, Muslims, Hindus, you name it, all suddenly united in their response to this thing. More recently, we have seen how one highly publicized event can galvanize an entire society into action. If the world can be made to believe that it faces an existential threat, we have seen how quickly and how radically it can move to combat it. Scare people enough, and they will be willing to do just about anything. We have now seen a huge shift also in the legal framework. Judgments have been made that essentially said, while this temporarily harms a person's constitutional rights, for the greater good of the society, the ruling is against the individual and the restoration of their legal rights. The rights of an individual are now suborned to the perceived greater good of the society. And of course, no one will venture to define how long this temporary harm might be. And then it dawned on me. One of these days, we will be the target. We will be the villain. We will be portrayed as the existential threat to the world. Those who follow God and keep the faith of Jesus, the Bible tells us, will face persecution in the last days. So much so that the third angel of Revelation 14 says that blessed are those who die from now on, because they will rest. The experience of Job is going to be our experience in the final days, while most of the world is still stuck on the question, if God is so loving and so good, how come that there is so much hurt and injustice? Why is this world in such a mess if God is in control? And don't get me wrong, these are very good questions. And they're questions we should help our friends with. We should help our friends and neighbors understand those. Because the clear understanding of the great controversy between Christ and Satan that is raging all around us is a unique message of the Adventist Church. We are called to bring clarity to world's history and the present time in light of this message. And the book of Job throws it wide open for us. The first 2 chapters of Job really set up the whole story. That's why that little insert suggested that you read them before coming tonight. The scripture reading that Kelly read just gave you a little taste of it. I would suggest in reading the whole book when you have the opportunity, but here we will cover just a brief overview. The Heavenly Council is meeting together, and the sons of God came to present themselves before God. Now, some translations don't know what to do with this. So, depending on your translation, you'll see angels or heavenly beings. But the Hebrew original quite clearly says, sons of God. What I'm going to share with you, it blew my mind when I saw it. When Luke does the genealogy of Jesus, he quite literally goes clear back to Adam and says, Adam, son of God. So it would appear that in this heavenly council that was meeting, it was Adam who should have been representing our planet. But instead Satan shows up, since Adam and Eve essentially handed in the keys to our planet, and God challenges Satan on this. Where have you come from? And Satan is more than happy to rise to the challenge, assuming the air of a king who has just spent time surveying his domain. From roaming through the earth and going to and fro in it. And this next part is so neat because it is Job that allows God to challenge Satan's kingship over this world. He says, God says, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Put simply, God is telling Satan that he does not recognize his claim on planet Earth because God still has friends loyal to him on this planet. And notice also that God himself calls Job blameless and upright, which becomes significant as you read the book and the argument of Job's friends. So this is where it gets interesting. Satan alleges that Job is a fair-weather friend. He's only loyal to God because God has blessed him and prospered him. When I was a kid growing up in Belgrade, there was an old man in our church. And to my shame, to this day, I do not know his real name. You can see a picture of him on the left there with one of my friends. He wasn't much to look at. He kind of wheezed and grunted and was barely intelligible when he spoke. He had a mostly toothless grin, wore pretty tattered old clothes. But us kids loved it. And we loved him for a very specific reason. In his beaten up old leather bag, which I swear must have dated to World War I, he carried little taped up packets which usually contained 3 or 4 candy. And so us kids knew him simply as Grandpa with the candy. Every week after church we would seek him out to get that little taped up packet of candy. And he kept track. You couldn't fool him and get it twice. Satan alleged that this was the kind of relationship that God and Job had. Job was in it only for the candy. Take away the candy, and Job will not only cease to be loyal to God, he would actually turn against him, cursing to his face. And so, with the entire universe watching in rapt attention, God allows Satan to test his theory. There are some huge questions to be answered. How well does God know people? Is God and his friendship enough? Or does God have to buy people's loyalty with candy, as it were? With the eyes of the entire universe fixed on him, God entrusts Job, a mere human, to answer these important questions trusting that his friend will not let him down. And Satan didn't waste any time. In one day, he took away all of Job's possessions, and then he took away his kids as well. Can you imagine losing everything? Everything you own in one day. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the same day you lose all your children. I would hazard a guess that would be a sucker punch from which very few of us would be able to recover. But Job held on. Next time the heavenly council met, Satan was again there, strutting like the king of the earth. And God just had to point out, look, Job is still there. I'm doing rather well, man. So Satan plays the final card. Job is a heartless man. He doesn't care about property or even his kids. But a man will do anything to save his own skin. Let me at it. And God does. Notice that Satan did not attempt to lure Job away with even more camera. Instead, he destroys everything, since that's how he rolls. And so as the camera now pans to the earth, we see Job in deep depression. And can you blame him? He has lost his family, his wealth, and now also his health. Covered in gauze, Job is sitting among the ashes and scraping himself with a piece of broken pottery. 3 of his friends show up to comfort and console him, and for a whole week, they just sat with him on the ground in silence. Finally, Job breaks the silence with a deep lament. I wish I had never been born so I wouldn't have to endure this, says Job. Of course, he uses an entire chapter to say it, but that's what it boils down to. Well, since Job has now broken the silence, one of his friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, speaks up and goes right for the jugular. See, it becomes clear very early on that there was a basic assumption upon which the 3 friends operated on. If you were wealthy and healthy, you must be a very good person because God has so richly blessed you. Conversely, if you were poor and ill, you must be a sinner and God is punishing you. Well, since Job was so wealthy, he must have been a good man. But now that he has so dramatically lost everything, the 3 friends just knew that God must have sinned quite severely, since he has obviously upset God something fierce. Consider these 2 opening statements by Eliphaz. Consider now, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Actually, we see it pretty much every day. Never mind. How about this one? If God places no trust in his servants, if he charges his angels with error, how much more those who live in houses of clay? Does God really not place any trust in his servants? Does he really charge his angels with error? Of course, neither Job nor his friends were privy to the discussion in heaven that we saw in the first 2 chapters. Had they been privy to it, they would have realized that at that very moment, God was actually trusting his servant Job to answer some of the most important questions about himself in front of the entire universe. A lot of the ensuing discussion centers on God's power and omniscience. And the irony is that all of the participants in this discussion acknowledge God as powerful, as the creator, as someone who knows everything. The 3 friends keep talking about it as if it is the central issue here, and Job just keeps agreeing with them, acknowledging the exact same thing. See, God's power has never been in dispute. James says, you believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. has been at the heart of the dispute is how God uses his power. Does he use it to coerce by threats of death, as Satan charged when he spoke to Eve in the garden? Does God use his power to buy loyalty, as Satan now charged in the case of Job? What really bothered Job, however, is that God is no longer talking to him. His friends just know for a fact that God must have sinned because he lost everything. But Job is puzzled. He knows that in his heart, his attitude toward God has not changed. He has not turned against God. So the only other variable that he sees is that God has turned against him. Why? So what Job really wants to do is to be able to talk to God and find out what is going on. I will say to God, do not condemn me, but tell me what charges you have against me. It's fair enough, isn't it? Only grant me these two things, O God, and then I will not hide from you. Withdraw your hand far from me. See, he thought it was God doing it all. And stop frightening me with your terrors. Then summon me, and I will answer, or let me speak, and you reply. How many wrongs and sins have I committed? Show me my offense and my sin. Why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? All Job wants to do is to talk with God so he can get things cleared up. Job didn't know that the truth was exactly the opposite of what it appeared to be. But here is how he describes his relationship with God. How I long for the months gone by, for the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. Oh, for the days when I was in my prime, when God's intimate friendship blessed my house, when the Almighty was still with me and my children around me. You get the impression that Job is mourning the loss of a special friend. Job may have enjoyed the candy, but he wasn't in it just for the candy, as Satan suggested. Job had a close relationship with God, and to him, that friendship was important. That is what hurt him the most. It seemed to him that God had withdrawn his friendship from him and turned against him, and Job wanted to know why. This friendship with God was too important to him to throw away. These are the kind of people God is looking for at the end of time. The ubiquitous remnants. Those who love the Lord too much and value their relationship with him too much to compromise themselves. God is looking for modern-day Jobs. Remember at the beginning I showed you how Adam was called the Son of God and was supposed to represent our planet in the Heavenly Council? But then Satan showed up instead, claiming earth was his. Now, couple that with Romans 5. Jesus came as second Adam to reclaim our planet, to reclaim our race for God, to lead us back to God and bring reconciliation between God and us. Jesus is the second Adam, assuming leadership of our planet and reclaiming us for God. But the controversy is not over. Before Satan can be fully dispossessed, God has to win one final argument in this controversy. God needs people who are saved. People who are so settled into the truth that nothing can move them. People for whom their relationship to God means so much that they will stick to him even if there is not one possible earthly advantage in doing so. People who are not in it for the candy. Because when the final events take place, when the four winds are let go, Satan will throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at us. There will be no church to hide behind. By that stage, the Seventh-day Adventist Church will either be driven out of existence, or if it still exists, it will be part of Babylon. I mean, at that stage, there is no other way it would be allowed to carry on. Each one of us will have to stand alone. Each one of us will have to bear our own witness. Jesus himself told us in Matthew 24, "For there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again." If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. That is what we have to look forward to. Looking at the world as it is today, if I may be completely honest, I do not relish having a big fat target painted on my back by Satan. It's scary. And yet, what a privilege to be able to stand up for God at this crucial time and help him settle this once and for all. It means that we get to go home real soon. Maybe it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. We know it'll hurt. Let's get it over and done. It was June 1940. A couple of weeks before, the Belgian, French, and British armies were driven into the sea by Hitler's advancing army. In one of the most incredible operations ever recorded in the history of war, over 338,000 British and Allied troops were taken off the shores at Dunkirk and returned to England, where they could live to fight another day. By June 16th, the French were seeking an armistice with the Germans. Britain stood alone. Europe was overrun, and America, you will recall, did not join the war for another year and a half. The entire force of the German military was about to descend on Britain. And so on June 18, 1940, Prime Minister Winston Churchill went to the House of Commons and addressed members of Parliament and the British people. "The Battle of France is over," he said. "I expect that the Battle of Britain..." Oh, I guess I should have had that. Thank you. "The Battle of France is over," Churchill said. "I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Let us, therefore, brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." Unlike Prime Minister Churchill, we have the benefit of being able to read the back of the book and finding out how it all ends. Nevertheless, it is true that the whole fury of the enemy will very soon be turned on us. Let us, therefore, brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves, so in the kingdom of God which will last forever. Men will still say, this was God's and ours.